Will you introduce yourself, your name, what you do, and the artist you manage?
Yeah, I'm Victoria. I'm an artist manager at Only Helix in London. I manage Spider, Eli, OM, and I co-manage Charlie, Lavender, and Trout.
How do you come up with content ideas for social media, or how do you coach your clients through creating their own content?
I think it's really important for an artist to have an idea of how they want to come across. I don't necessarily want to be saying you should post this and this. I think if you're going to be posting things on social media, we spend so much time on TikTok and Instagram that it's really obvious when someone's not authentic. So ultimately, I think you need to go into it having an idea of how you want to come across and who you are as an artist, and stay true to that. I think generally I would try and keep things related to music. You don't want to build up a fan base of people who don't actually care about your art. And, it's amazing to have hundreds of thousands of followers, but if they have no interest in your music and that's what you want to promote, you need to kind of be leading back to that. And I think it can be hard to know how much to give away. You might not want to film in the studio and things like that, which I think is fine. And I think it's important to know what you're comfortable sharing and not feel like you're giving too much away or giving too much of a behind the scenes look. But equally, I think it's just interesting for an audience as well to see a bit of the behind the scenes, whether that's you filming it yourself or maybe getting a content person in or a friend who's super into filming and social media to help out, just to give a bit of build a bit more world around you as an artist rather than just here are my songs and that's it. But then I also think it's good to keep a bit of mystery around it. You don't want to be giving everything away.
So are you saying it's a good idea to kind of document what you're doing versus seeing it as you have to create content, just kind of keep track of what you're doing, film it, and then post snippets of that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it can be such a drag if you're oh no, I need to be filming for TikTok, I think, or Instagram or YouTube or whatever. But I think if you can kind of get in the habit, and I think it's nice to have as well to look back on as an artist to see your journey and being super excited before your first show or something. It's just nice to have that. But then, yeah, be selective with what you feel comfortable sharing.
What have you seen as being the most successful channel for marketing? For example, is it TikTok or Instagram? What right now is working really well for your artists?
At the moment, obviously TikTok. In the past, Colors was a few years ago helpful. But yeah, at the moment, TikTok would be the one that I think there's just feels like the most people are using and are most engaged with. But equally, I do think there's the danger of you don't want to be posting with the hopes of only posting because you're I have to go viral. That's the only way I'm going to make it. I think it needs to be a accessory rather than being your one focus. Your focus should still be on music.
Are there any things that you recommend? It doesn't have to just be on the marketing side, but any daily or weekly things that you ask your artists to do to help them out in their careers and help it moving along?
Well, it obviously varies depending on what your focus is. Whether it's around a release, there has to be more of a focus on marketing that release and being visible. But generally, I really try and encourage artists to be writing all the time. I think that's the most important thing. I think there's a fear of people can be scared of writing a bad song, and that can be quite paralyzing. But it is a skill that you have to hone and keep practicing. And even if it's feels disappointing to have come away from a session and been that song really sucks, no one has to hear it. It can just, I'm always it can just go in a Dropbox and no one ever has to hear it and it doesn't matter. But you might learn something in that session, or there might be a little hook in a song that you use in something else. I think that really is the most important thing, to keep practicing your craft and be gigging a lot, feel really confident with that. But yeah, songs is the most important thing, I think, more than TikTok or Instagram.
And if an artist has a release coming up, is there anything that you want them to do on a daily basis to promote that?
Yeah, all the boring stuff of encouraging people to pre-save the track. And I think it can feel really cringe when you're in the moment being like, oh my God, I like keep posting the same song. But if you think of it like from the other side of it, we all see like so much content every day. To you as an artist, posting like a few times a week, it might feel like loads, but if you think like how many clips we see or like Instagram posts we see to everyone else, it doesn't feel like that much like for a fan. So I think it annoyingly is important to be really active, despite you gotta just fight through the cringe.
Just remember that you're not being as annoying as you might seem.
Yeah, it's you always feel like you're more annoying than you actually are, I think.
So let's say you have a new artist who's just starting out. How would you suggest they build their fan base from scratch, get those first 1,000 fans that are actually going to engage with their content longer term?
I think it's obviously important to be consistent. It's also, I think, really important to not just be thinking about online. We've seen with like so many artists who've blown up on TikTok, especially over the pandemic, which is amazing. Obviously, they have all these eyes on them, but then when you translate it to the real world, they don't really have that live experience that other artists have. And I think that's hindered them a bit. So I think as well as building online, it is really important to try and be, building those real life communities as well, and forging connections that way, playing shows, making friends like within the music community in your area if that's possible, and collaborating with them I think is super important. And I think it's great when you can find people whose fan bases kind of like crossover, and you can kind of, it's just nice as well I think to have that community, because it can be quite isolating I think to be an artist, especially if you're, even when you're experiencing success, I think it can be like quite a weird time. And I think it's really important to have those real life connections with other artists. And it's just nice as well to do shows with your friends.
When you're scouting out new artists to represent, is there anything in particular that you're looking out for? So maybe a checklist of things or just a kind of energy? What are you looking for?
A good manager or a good A&R can hear like potential within an artist. They don't have to be like a fully formed, perfect radio hit. So I think being able to identify that potential is important. For me, like an artist has to have a vision of what they want to do. I don't want to be saying like, you should be like this other artist or like emulating that. I really think it's important, and I only really want to work with artists who have like a really clear vision of who they are and what they stand for, and also who are ambitious is like the most important thing. Like I would hate to work with an artist who's like, oh yeah, like I guess I'll play some shows. Like I want someone who's like, I want to win Grammys. Like I want to really like make a good go at this, because it's really hard and you get knocked down a lot, and it can be like super disheartening, and it's really hard work. So I think you have to like intrinsically have that drive to want to succeed.
So you're looking for artists who have clear goals and who understand who they are, so that you can just elevate that and help them achieve them?
Yeah, exactly. And I obviously, like, a manager's there to help you and help you realize those goals, but you can't like give ambition to someone. They have to have that themselves.
What strategies do you use to develop an artist brand and image? Say they either don't know who they want to be and you're helping them figure it out, or they do and you want to help portray that to their audience. What do you do?
I think the team is really important and definitely shouldn't be overlooked. Like that's actually one of my favorite parts of like managing an artist, is building the team and sort of finding the people who I think can help elevate their vision and help them get there, whether that's like a publicist or a stylist or a photographer. It's really good to find those people who you feel like you can trust to help you execute, how you want to come across. So I think that's really important. I think also it's really good to have a lot of references to draw from, like really listening to a lot of music and being aware of pop culture, and like watching lots of films and having all those reference points to draw from, I think can only be a good thing. Not that you should be copying things, but I think there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn from not necessarily just music as well, just sort of surrounding yourself by art and interesting people and watching and listening to interesting things, I think can really help with helping you have ideas for maybe how you want to come across visually.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about live performances. I'm not sure if you're involved in the booking gigs. I know that's more of a booking agent's role, but if you are, how do you approach booking gigs, tours, and other live performances, like choosing venues, or if you're looking out for support slots that would help boost the artist? What do you do in that area?
Yeah, I always like to get a live agent involved quite early on, just because like I don't want to pretend to know what I'm doing. Like there are experts that have to do that, and I'll help to the best of my ability. But I think, you know, if you can find a really great booking agent who believes in you, that's a really valuable asset for your team. I think it can be really easy to just say yes to every show offer that comes in, but I think there is a strategy and an art to it. Like, as much as it might be cool, I think it's important to think about the fan base of artists that you might be supporting. Like, hold on, let me think what else. And like venues, I think there's like positioning that's important to keep in mind, and like quality of the venue. You have to play bad shows in your life, but if you can avoid them as much as possible for the soul, I think you should try.
And when you're first starting out, do you think it's more important to do your own headline shows to smaller venues, or try and get on support slots for bigger bands?
I think it just depends on the act. Like I've kind of strategized it in different ways. I took on an artist called Eli recently, and straight away she went on a support tour with Lauren from Churches. Pretty much like from the get-go. She hasn't done like a headline show yet, but then others I've waited longer of doing like no shows and kind of building up like a bit of a buzz so that the first show will be like packed out. I think it's quite good to be like conservative though with your first show. Like you want it to feel really buzzy and like be sold out and hard to get into, as much as it might be tempting to be like, oh, I want to play this like cool big venue. I think, you know, work your way up to it gradually.
What is your approach to social media management and online promotion? I know you touched on that a little bit earlier, but will you talk a little bit more about how often you should post, or switching up the type of content, things like that? Do you keep those things in mind?
Yeah, I keep it in mind. I do feel like TikTok especially it feels like it's changing all the time, and it can be quite hard to try and understand the algorithm. There's definitely people who are a lot smarter and probably younger than me who understand it way better. But I think, yeah, consistency seems to be key. I think it's good to be posting a few times a week if you can. But again, not kind of just posting for the sake of it if it's making you miserable.
My final question for you is, what are some common mistakes that musicians make that really frustrate you and you want them to stop doing?
I think kind of like what I was saying earlier of it doesn't like make me angry because I understand where it's coming from, but that thing of kind of feeling like so terrified to make a bad song that you're completely paralyzed by it, I think is like can be fatal. You need to be willing to take risks. I guess the most frustrating thing for me is like artists that don't work hard. It's quite like distressing as a manager if you feel like you're working so much harder than the artist and you're really trying to make it work for them and then they can't be bothered. That's definitely frustrating. So yeah, write songs and work hard would be my tip.